So hello, everybody. My name is Amelia Bono. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the executive director of Shout Your Abortion. SYA is a nationwide organization working to normalize abortion access. I'm spotlighted. That was unexpected. Things are bouncing around. Let's try that again. SYA is a nationwide organization working to normalize abortion and elevate paths to access regardless of legality. We make resources, campaigns, and media intended to arm existing activists, create new ones, and foster collective participation in abortion access all over the country. So thank you so much for being here for our final 2023 installment of Abortion Academy. Each of these monthly webinars are presented by one of our exceptionally brilliant colleagues whose work we want to introduce to our larger SYA community. We hope that Abortion Academy will deepen your knowledge, propel your curiosity, help you connect some of the dots between issues that you're navigating regionally and what's happening at the national and international level, and ultimately give you fresh ideas to take back into your community. Audience members will be off camera and muted for security reasons, but we will have a format for you to ask questions throughout the presentation, which Genevieve will answer after about 40 minutes of speaking. So today we're going to be hearing from Genevieve Tam, who is the Chief Operating Officer for Vitala Global and one of the developers behind an app called Aya Contigo. Aya was initially launched in Venezuela in 2022 and intended to address the high rates of unsafe abortions that were being caused by the country's intense humanitarian and economic crisis. More recently, Vitala was able to bring this app to the US to support the Latinx community, who, of course, are disproportionately affected by abortion bans. Genevieve is a Canadian OB gynecologist who has spent the last 15 years working in global women's health with various NGOs around the world, including Doctors Without Borders. And in these international contexts, Genevieve saw the potential for localized, community-led, and user-centered digital solutions to support people living in challenging contexts. She's going to talk to us today about the process of developing Aya Contigo and how she believes that apps like Aya Contigo can help address the disparities and stigma which accompany reproductive health care, unfortunately, all over the world. And with that, I will hand it over to Genevieve.
Thank you very much, Amelia. We're very grateful at Vitala for Shout Your Abortion support throughout our journey of trying to understand how to bring Aya Contigo in a meaningful community-led way in the US. And I'll talk more about it during the presentation, but thank you to the Shout Your Abortion team for always being so inclusive and including us on all opportunities to discuss how to advance abortion care and access for all people, and especially the hard to reach. So I will share my screen to start the presentation, and hopefully I won't have any tech issues. So if I press slideshow, everybody sees my screen, okay? Perfect, I'm going to proceed. If you don't see anything, let me know. Perfect. So Vitala, our mission is to empower people with digital companions for abortion, miscarriage, and contraception self-care. And I'm going to start at the beginning, how Rupan and I, my co-founder, came together to found Vitala. So we both met in Canada during our OBGYN residencies in Ottawa, and we had a shared common passion to work in global women's health as part of our career. And as you know, as a doctor working in North America, it's difficult to kind of think outside the box of just a regular practice setting. And so we really had to kind of forge our ways as to how we would include global health, women's health in our careers in general. So we did our own things, explored different areas of global women's health, including maternal health. We both ended up working for Doctors Without Borders and having a lot of on-the-ground experiences in the humanitarian settings. Rupan had a chance to also work at the WHO and did a lot of great things for including abortion medications on the essential medicine list. And then basically, we got started during the pandemic with a grant to innovate on self-managed abortion in humanitarian settings. So at Vitala, both Rupen and I co-lead a global remote team. We started off as the two of us in 2020, and we grown to about 30. We do have a range of part-time versus full-time folks. Most of them are part-time because we're trying to leverage folks with very distinct expertise in certain areas to be able to make sure we have a good intersection and approach to our work. And so that's why we have so many people, because we want to have different expertise in different areas. So most of them work part-time, and they're located all over North America, South America, and Europe. We're majority female, and many are young people. So we're really grateful to have their input as part of this process, because Rupen and I are still young, but not the youngest. And we have about 40% of them Latinas. And we also have a lot of volunteers, students, and partner support to help us do this work. And so Vitala started off right off the bat as very focused on human-centered design in our approach to looking at how we can leverage digital solutions to support stigmatized sexual and reproductive health areas. And we quickly realized from our joint experiences in the field with, like, for example, Doctors Without Borders, the importance of centering the user in all the work that we do, because as great and big of an organization like MSF, they had to deal with issues about localization too when they had to implement their programs in certain humanitarian contexts. Not one protocol is going to fit all the different settings. So in those experiences, we learned the importance of adaptation in order to get better feedback and a user experience. And so this is where we highlight the fact that we center the user, we center the community, we think broadly across disciplines to make sure that all the different stakeholders are contributing to the work to bring a holistic approach. And so our principles are guided by equitable inclusivity, empathy, data-driven insights, and judgment-free information. The fact that it needs to be accessible, needs to be rooted in the context, and we're very we need to be open to adapting and iterating and changing to the context, because things could change. And a good example is like COVID happens, and you just have to pivot and accept that it's happening and move forward. And basically, the last one is really to understand where the most marginalized communities are coming from, and making sure that their needs are centered around the design and implementation process altogether. So our first grant was from Grand Challenges Canada. And basically the question that we wanted to address in this grant was, can a digital solution support self-managed abortion in a humanitarian context where abortion is illegal? And we're very grateful to Grand Challenges Canada, because they have a specific portfolio called the Options Portfolio, which is dedicated to funding abortion innovation, which is really rare and unheard of. Like, as you know, USAID, the biggest kind of development funders, does not want to touch abortion with a 10-foot pole. So we're just really grateful that there is like a funder that is like, we're just focused on abortion for this stream. So thanks to them, we got started. We got our kickstart to our work at Vitala. And so Venezuela was chosen as the humanitarian context where we would test this for various reasons. One reason was that it's a very neglected humanitarian context. It's been a protracted crisis for the last like dozen years, and there's been no change. And it's also because of the political situation, it doesn't get much funding or resources. And Latin America in general doesn't get much funding or resources in the area of SRH. So that was one thing. Second thing was that we were able to find a very strong partner on the ground that provides SRH services that was willing to work with us to look at unsafe abortion and address it from a harm reduction point of view. And so that was really critical for us to even start the work, is to know that we have a strong partner that has buy-in in this process to help us go through this process of implementing an innovation in Venezuela. And lastly, there's high smartphone penetration reach we learned in Venezuela. So we thought this was kind of a good place to start. And it's illegal. Abortion is illegal except to save a woman's life, and even that's not practiced. So here is a New York Times article that actually highlighted the dire situation women are facing in Venezuela. And this came out shortly after we started our work, and it was helpful because it helped us to highlight the situation and to show donors that this is like a really bad situation. Basically, the article is showing the story of this woman, Flexibel, who died from an unsafe abortion with a puncture to the uterus because she was already had 2 children and she just couldn't afford, given the economic crisis in Venezuela, to raise another one. And so she went to unsafe methods to be able to actively choose her reproductive journey to be able to have a better life for her other 2 kids. And unfortunately, she died from it. And globally, we know that every 23 minutes, a woman dies from an unsafe abortion. So this is putting it kind of in the global context. Yeah, so how do we do co-creation? How do we do human-centered design process? So we learned very quickly that you have to start with really understanding the context. And so we went into an in-depth contextual analysis with the help of our partner, and another partner that we work with is FOS Feminista. They were previously called International Planned Parenthood Federation Western Hemisphere region. And so FOS Feminista worked with us on this grant because they are very strong in this feminist approach to family planning and abortion care access in Latin America. So they helped us to understand the context, understand the economic context, the political context, the SRH context, the legal context. And that helped us to understand where people are coming from. And then understanding who are the key players were important for us to know and to start talking to and seeing if we can be aligned with them and they could be partners in this work. And then after we've identified those, then we can go and approach the users. So through our partner, local partner, we were able to think about how to design ways to ask the users, what would they need? What do they need to help them avoid an unsafe abortion in Venezuela? And all this happened when the pandemic started. So we initially had this whole research protocol designed and even like ready to send to ethics boards for review, where we were going to get our partners to recruit women. It's like, for example, like this, sitting in the waiting room to do surveys on pieces of paper and then do interviews with them. But then because COVID happened, we were like, oh, we can't really do that anymore. And also our partners on the ground were completely overwhelmed dealing with just COVID and just keeping services going, despite those social distancing rules and people getting really sick. So we pivoted and we worked with a marketing firm to actually disseminate the survey online through social media. And since our partners are on the ground, were really well known, they had quite a bit of followers on their social media platforms already, we were able to leverage their reach to do that. And I'll show you some of the results in the next slides. And then after that, you take all this information that I just discussed, the contextual analysis, what partners are saying about what's happening on the ground when it comes to safe abortion access, what the users are saying, and then you take all that information and you try to put it all together like a puzzle and start to develop a prototype to have the users test and then eventually develop and implement. And again, going into all this, we did not have a preconceived notion of what the technology or what the innovation would be. We wanted to be led by the research. So the contextual analysis showed the following. Yes, it was a protracted humanitarian crisis. There's failing healthcare systems, poverty, scarcity. The pandemic was happening, a lot of stigma, restrictive laws, tons of misinformation, a lot of lack of judgment-free and compassionate care, and people are just super isolated with lack of support. So this is the ad we put on Facebook to get people to do the survey. And we learned in Venezuela that you can't even use the word women in your ads. So you can see how like it's very, very general because there's a big censorship in Venezuela. So can't use the word women, let alone contraception or pregnancy or abortion. So even with that, we were able to get 1,148 people respond to our survey. We actually had to shut it down after six days because it was getting overwhelming. And interestingly, we had 71% response rate, which is like unheard of when you think about it from a research perspective. You're happy to get 20% response rate in surveys. And so this survey was not just like a fun survey. It was like, have you had an abortion? What did you do when you had the abortion? If you didn't have abortion, do you know anybody who had an abortion? Where did you go? Who helped you? And we had a lot of general questions too around like, oh, demographics, but also like how to use technology. What are your favorite apps? Who do you go to for resources about sexual and reproductive health? So altogether, it was a quite long survey that the marketing people were like, hey, you should probably cut it. And we're like, no, we want to know the answers. And the women in Venezuela were just so hungry to have people ask them and talk to them about their SRH needs that this is kind of this is the reflection of that. And we're very, very happy that we were able to reach so many people and get their opinions on that. So 42% reported having an unplanned pregnancy, 20% reported having an abortion. So these are kind of in the general statistics of what happens in, the US, how we know, 1 in 4 people will have an abortion in their lifetime. And so it was kind of reflection that doesn't matter if you're in an illegal setting or in a humanitarian crisis, this still happens. People will find a way and they will get it done. And hopefully they won't die or get injured by doing so. This is just to show you that from the people we ended up interviewing 12 people that had gone through an unsafe or clandestine abortion in Venezuela. And this was just representing the general demographics to make sure that we had a good representation and sample. And this is an example of the qualitative stories that we got from these interviews and how important it was to really understand their context and to take that into consideration when designing the intervention or the digital solution. Yeah, so this one was in their own words, in the moment of abortion when women needs the most emotional support. This is like the key theme that was identified by the UX UI researcher when she was combing through all the data from the interviews, from the surveys, and from the stakeholder. And basically there was inconsistent information available for them. There was not one reliable source of information they could turn to. And then Louisa, a quote from Louisa, I needed to do the abortion, but I couldn't even feed myself, much less could I afford to have clothes and diapers and food. And in this context, just to give you an idea, the monthly average wage in Venezuela was like $20 US per month. It's a very, very difficult situation. Yes, it's a complex humanitarian emergency, difficult decision-making because of fear of persecution. There is no emotional support, but that's when it's most needed during the moment of abortion. Internet connectivity was difficult, even though people had access to smartphones. There's a lot of misinformation. Everyone turned to the internet for information, even though they couldn't find reliable information. And basically people said they wanted to be able to download something that they could use offline because of the internet connectivity issue, and that they could go through on their own time. And so that led us to the next step, which is the prototype consideration. So all those things we put together, and it came, and basically the results were, okay, we need something secure and private. We need something to provide up-to-date information. It needs to be appealing visually. It can't be too heavy because their smartphones are not like up the state-of-the-art smartphones, so they have very little memory. Again, they have to be used offline. It has to be easy to, like, they're not so used to navigating so many complicated apps. And they wanted something that is going a little bit beyond abortion and just not to be so like sad and propagating the stigma. Yeah, so a UX UI design researcher put together the prototype design, and a UX UI stands for user experience and user interface. It's a very specific field that kind of came around when websites and apps started becoming mainstream and popular. And so she goes through different steps to put together all the information. You'll see like her wall is covered with all this data from all these different sources. And then she pulls all the themes to kind of inform the design process. And then she presents the information to the partners that we have worked with throughout this co-creation process, because it's important that they come along the journey and inform as well the development of the design and the process. And then lastly, once that has been all done, then we can then start testing with the user, where you actually send a link to the user and they test it and they give you feedback. And you probably can relate to the fact that you used apps or websites that were just terrible. Like it didn't work. You couldn't find anything. It wasn't, you weren't able to get what you needed. And that's basically lack of UX, UI research and design efforts put into it before they designed and developed it. Because if you actually ask somebody, they would be like, no, you shouldn't put this button here, or you need this button there. So just think about all those times where you're frustrated. And that's an example of like not desirable UX, UI design for the application or the website. And you probably noticed too that some websites are only designed for a computer, and then you try to do it on your phone and they're not optimized. Again, that's like come with the UX, UI design that needs to be thought about. Like, you have to think about, oh, people might be using their phones. Okay, we need to design for that. So that's why it's important to always think of the user at every step of this process. So for this is an example of like the prototyping, even the colors and the name. Our UX designer held workshops with stakeholders and partners to just make sure that it resonated. And in the end, this is how it looks. This was the Caribbean colors they wanted. They wanted it to be warm, but yet not like, again, muted and kind of sad. They wanted to be like unapologetic. And so based on all the inputs, it was categorized that we needed a section that focused on abortion care, a section focused on contraception, and then a section focused on trusted resources. And so I can show you a quick demo of the first kind of version that was launched in Venezuela. Because all of you are in the US, you're actually able to download Aya Contigo and see what it looks like now as it was adapted to the US context. So now it's going through the abortion steps. And this is an example of one of the pages where we talk about what to expect, and then now how to take the pills with illustrations, because it's very tricky, especially with MIF and meso, the differences to understand how to take the pills properly. And this is our chat, virtual chat. And I'll talk a little bit more about that too. I just wanted to show this. And this is the contraception section, all the different options. And then it was important to add the cost for them to understand the sustainability of that. Yeah. Okay, so after it was designed and developed, so the UX UI researcher and designer, then after the prototype's done, then you have to hand it off to some developers. And those are software engineers that code basically the computer language to make it into an app. And we had this amazing development team out of San Francisco or California. Oh, they might not be out of there anymore, but they were based in California at the time, called Any Cannons. And we were so grateful that we found them because we really wanted to align with our values, to work with a partner that understood also what we're trying to do. And Any Cannons is a female-led, queer-led nonprofit software engineering company at the time. And they also trained victims of sex trafficking and gender-based violence to become software engineers and then hired them. So we were like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Because as you know, this tech world is very much like a bro kind of male world. So we were happy to find like-minded partners, and they understood immediately what we're trying to do. And it was a stark contrast with all the other kind of developer vendors that we had interviewed, and we were like, perfect. So that was kind of a nice synergy and with that partner. So after they developed it, we then piloted it, because once it's done, we still need to test it in the real world to make sure it works. So we basically recruited people that were seeking an abortion through our partners and asked them if they would be willing to use the app to help them through a self-managed abortion. Because again, in Venezuela, it's illegal to have the abortion. Our partners on the ground do not provide abortion care, but they are committed to a harm reduction approach, so they can tell them, this is how you avoid an unsafe abortion, because that's legal from a health information point of view. And then therefore they were able to refer them to us to be like, look, if you join the study and you can use this app to help you go through it, so then you're just not all alone. So this is part of this whole human-centered research and design process that we've put together, is that this pilot phase is really important for us, because it's like we're dealing with real people that are going through like a very critical time in their life. Yeah, so basically it showed that the app was supportive, and the app could help them, and that they found it very, very helpful to feel prepared, to feel confident. They knew it was a trusted resource because we quoted WHO, and we also quoted many other reliable resources in the app. And they had a positive experience using it. And then what we also learned was that because we did it in a research study way, and it was still COVID and remote, we were onboarding the participants through WhatsApp, because we couldn't do it on the ground in the clinic with the partners because of COVID. So Rupan and I were onboarding them and with Google Translate, and then they actually started, like, we would consent them, make sure they're eligible, and then we'd give them access to the app. And then they actually started chatting with us, and they were like, oh my gosh, they were asking us questions and we're answering. And so a lot of the feedback came back and said they liked being able to chat with the team. And then that made us realize that a static tool with information is good. It helps people. And some of the participants didn't chat with us, and they were very happy with the app. But some of them needed this extra, more in-person support. So because of that, we then were able to raise some funds to add the virtual chat component to the platform in general. So when we talk about Aya Contigo, yes, there's a digital app part, but there's also the virtual care team that's there to support people if they need to just chat and not feel so alone and just need some emotional support. So before we actually launched it, there is still another step. So after you learn about the pilot process, and then we learned, oh, we need to add this virtual chat. And then we were like, oh, but then we also need to make sure there's privacy and data protections now in place, because we're actually, and safeguarding, because now we actually have a team that's interacting with people. So we needed to make sure that was all optimized and everything was in place before we launched it. So we consulted an expert in cybersecurity and safeguarding that has done work in the region with specifically abortion activists in Latin America. And they were able to advise us on how to optimize everything across the app, the chat platform, how our team logs into our computers and so forth, to make sure that all the maximum protections were in place to support users, our team, and also our partners. Yeah, and then we set up a chat platform and we use the WhatsApp Business API because we learned that WhatsApp is the main source of communication in Venezuela. And actually, we know that for Latin America, in general, the Global South, just not the US or Canada. But the Global South, WhatsApp is the biggest form of communication because it's essentially free and data is very cheap. So that's why that's happening. So that's why we had to build the platform around that, is because that was the only way we can ensure we could continue communications with the users. And then we also learned from our partners and from the team that in order for the platform to remain viable in Venezuela, we really needed to ensure it's rooted in the community. So then we brought on a community engagement team to do just that, to make sure they can engage with partners, to engage with people, to think of ideas, to reach the people on the ground, because we know that we have this barrier of censorship, for digital censorship, for marketing. So there's a limitation to what we can do from a digital marketing standpoint. So that's when we recruited that part of the team. And then we had to make sure the referrals and protocols were in place. So Aya Contigo is a harm reduction information and support platform, but it's not a telemedicine platform. It does not provide the abortion pills. So this part was important for us to connect with grassroots feminist partners on the ground that's already doing the work. So these feminist accompagnantes, accompaniers, you probably have heard of them. They have been accompanying people through abortions with medications for the last 40 years, basically since misoprostol was discovered in Brazil as an abortifacient. So this network is strong. They've been doing it. So we realized that we need to make sure we're partnered with them so that if anybody comes to our platform and needs access and also more accompaniment in person, they can be referred onwards. Some people come and they already find the pills, and they find the pills through the black market, or they buy it for an exorbitant price at the pharmacy, or even from the doctor will sell it to you at a price. And so there are different ways that people are accessing and reaching it. And we just wanted to make sure that those who do not have those resources have the right referrals and connections to those feminist grassroots partners. Yeah, and then we had to make sure that we are monitoring and looking at our processes in a way that we can continually iterate and improve the user experience, and get more users engaged to deepen our impact. So this is a summary of basically what we offer. There is the WhatsApp chat, and there's also the chat that's embedded within the app. So you don't have to go to WhatsApp to chat. You can also chat within the app itself. And so since we launched in March 2022, we've engaged with more than 30 partners, and our aim is to always grow our partnerships because we feel like that's the most meaningful way we can reach the people that need the support of Aya Contigo. And so that's our main pillar of the community engagement team. And then we can see from the app analytics that does not collect IP addresses that over 6,000 unique people have accessed the app and engaged with the app. And through the chat conversations, we know that there's been over 600 different types of chats, ranging from abortion, which is the majority of the conversations, to contraception. It was very nice to see that some people would be there for the abortion, then come back to ask for contraception. So that was kind of a nice highlight for that team. And then when we asked the chat users for feedback, we've gotten 97% positive rating for the support that the team has provided them. Oops. Oh, sorry. Back? Okay. So essentially, summing it all up here, the app is just like the tip of the iceberg. It's the way that we can reach people through digital, but it's not the be and end all of our work. So this is just highlighting that it's the care team in the virtual chat is required, and that adds to the quality of care that we want to provide, the holistic care. That's important for us. That's a core pillar. And that also includes quality of care of referrals to the partner. So ensuring that we have referrals in place for other SRH needs that we cannot provide. For example, support around sexual and gender-based violence, or other counseling needs that the people need related to their current situation. And then the community engagement team is there to build trust with the community, to build partnerships, to do advocacy work in the form of destigmatizing abortion by providing workshops to just kind of talk about it in a framework of, you know, there's unsafe abortions happening. It's illegal in Venezuela. What can we do to mitigate that situation right now? Post-abortion care is legal, like working around what people are willing to talk about to kind of introduce reproductive autonomy into the discussion. Okay, so this is a nice video that our team put together to describe the user journey.
Navegamos en septiembre y guiamos el barco para que para chocar. Ofrecemos información para que nosotros la velocidad y hablamos de la necesidad para que pudiesen. Que no había otra persona físicamente en su casa ese día, en ningún momento estuvo realmente solo.
Did you guys hear that? Sorry, I just saw the chat. It's okay. Okay, I will continue. Oh, no.
We couldn't hear, but it seemed like most of the text was on the screen.
Oh, no. Sorry.
It still was really compelling, honestly, and beautiful.
Oh, too bad. The music's very nice. Well, basically, the sound was a Spanish speaker. Our team did the voiceover, and it was actually a user journey. Maybe if we have time in the end, I can try to fix the sound and do it again.
We will send the link out to everybody.
Okay, perfect. And so this is our team. Since we're all remote, it's very difficult. Sometimes we have moments where we can meet and it's very nice. And examples are like at the S28 marches, September 28th marches. And here's our little sticker for Aya. And then, yes, okay, I think I talked enough about this. Oh yeah, let's move on. Okay, so let's bring it back to the US for now. And so basically, our intention was never to kind of do our work in the US. Our intention was always, let's test Venezuela and then let's see if we can bring it to other restrictive continents in Latin America. As you know, there's a lot of countries with very severe abortion restrictions and laws within Central and South America. And so we were really, that was kind of our focus. But then because of Roe, the reversal of Roe, we were like asked by a lot of people, like, you need to come to the US and support the Latinx community. So we did our research. We did our whole process. Okay, not to the extent that I showed you in Venezuela, but we kind of like fast forwarded and packaged it. But we did the consultation and the process, and I'll talk about it in the next slide. But I just want to highlight here from the Latina Institute report that was released recently in October. State abortion bans threaten 6.7 million Latinas. They're actually the largest group of women of color living under these bans. Over 1 million Latinas in these banned states report not speaking English at all or not speaking it well. And 42% of Latinas of reproductive age living in the 26 states there's 42% no 42% of Latinas of reproductive age live in these states. So it's a very significant proportion of women of reproductive age that identify as Latina living in these bans or potentially banned states. That's what I'm trying to get at. So it's a huge gap. And so basically we were like, can we apply Aya Contigo's harm reduction community model of care and bring it to the Latinx and Hispanic community in the US? And so we did our work. We talked to over 50 plus US reproductive health and rights stakeholders and built strategic partnerships to do that user research, to do the user testing. And basically we learned that there's definitely a need for a Spanish first user-centric resource that was designed with a Spanish speaker and a marginalized Spanish speaker that's facing restrictions in mind for self-managed abortion. And there's definitely a need for more psycho-emotional support for Spanish speakers, especially in banned states. And so because of these findings, we did get some financial support and some in-kind support to go ahead and adapt the app to make sure that it makes sense for the US context. And we don't have really much time for this. And since I don't have audio, I will continue. And so again, we spent basically almost a year and then a few months adapting Aya Contigo to bring to the US. And then we timed the launch with International Safe Abortion Day on September 28th, because we really wanted to make sure we highlight that unsafe abortion is a global problem that has been an issue forever and still is. It's one of those maternal health issues that hasn't changed despite all this attention being put on maternal health. Like death from postpartum hemorrhage has improved, death from infections and high blood pressure has improved in pregnancy, but death from unsafe abortions has not. So we really just wanted to highlight all the important work that's being done globally, the fact that these amazing feminist accompaniers have been doing this work to support people in a holistic, judgment-free, stigma-free way to empower people's reproductive autonomy in Latin America. So we wanted to tie that into our launch to show that we're bringing all these learnings and insights and our proof of concept in Venezuela to apply it to support the Latinx community and the Hispanic community in the US. So this is where you can download it. It's on the Apple Store. It's on the Google Play Store. This is the landing page where you can find more information about the app at hola.ayacontigo.org. And then, so why could Aya be a game changer? These are kind of all the key highlights of our work. It is a local solution to a global problem. We are committed in the work that we do to localize everywhere we go. So for example, in the US, we are committed to ensuring and expanding our partnerships so that we can ensure users get the proper referrals, get to the right resources, that we're not being redundant also in the work that we do. So when we designed the resource section in the app, it wasn't like we were like plan C has it all down. You know, I need an A and Abortion Finder and you know, if, when, and how, they have all their things down. Like we don't need to redo everybody's things. So what we focused on was what would a Spanish speaker that's marginalized, that's a migrant, that has no credit card, that has no status, what would that person need to navigate resources and to get what they need to get a safe abortion. So that's kind of like what I mean by like we really try to fit in with the ecosystem. We want to be synergistic. We want to be able to amplify other people's strengths and then just fill the gaps. And again, yes, recognizing the green wave movement and how it's been important and played a big piece, like especially with SYA being like advocacy around activism, like this plays an important role in advancing the concept of self-managed abortion. When we first started approaching this work in the US, like a year ago, over a year ago, like if you mentioned self-managed abortion, people are like, ah. And especially as both Rupan and I are OBGYNs and doctors too, it was interesting to navigate that context in the US where healthcare is like, you know, in the hands of doctors and medical providers, like there's like kind of a bit of like a gatekeeping, and you need to really, you know, get permission or navigate all your health through a doctor. And so we believe, and it's aligned with recommendations that are global, like the WHO, that self-managed abortion is safe. We've seen that it's safe. We've shown that it's safe through the support of Aya Contigo as well in Venezuela. It's been happening all over the world, and women have the power. People that can become pregnant have the ability to do this safely, as long as they're given the right information and they're given the support and they're given choice. So if they want to do it surgically, they should be able to have it surgically. If they want to do it with medication in a clinic, they should be able to do it. If they want to do it at home, they should be able to do it. At any part in the process, if they want support, they should have support. So this is where we're trying to talk about self-managed abortion, not as something where somebody has to hide, you know, in their room and just take it on their own and feel really bad and really guilty about doing it because they feel like they don't have any other choice. No, there's various parts in the journey of your abortion journey that is going to be self-managed, even healthcare in general. Like you go to the doctor and you go home and you take your medicine, it's self-managed. So yes, so taking that narrative from the global south, the successes in that movement there, and so showing that self-managed abortion should be integrated as an option, a safe option, as part of the holistic offering for abortion care for the person seeking an abortion. Yeah, so this, I think you saw this in the video. Yeah, that's it.
Yay. Thank you so much, Genevieve. That was so good. And so those testimonials are incredible. I mean, I can't imagine how it would feel to like pour your heart into developing this project and just see it help people, like the metrics and the you know, quantitative data were just so affirming of, I think, your development methods and like the thing that you made. Did it feel pretty amazing to like hear that from folks?
Yeah, it's so nice that you bring this up, because that's kind of core to what we're trying to do. It's like it's deep impact. It's not just like large speech impact. It's important that we've supported this person, and this person can go on now and live the life that they want to live, and with reproductive, you know, honoring their reproductive choices. And so that's really important for us. And that's where we always are in discussion with grant funders and donors that, you know, yes, there's numbers, but yeah, so I can say 6,000 people use the app, but like, what does that mean? So it's difficult. It's difficult to quantify that if we're not collecting data. For example, it's difficult for us to understand which person used the app in a different way, because we were committed to not collecting email addresses or personal data. But what we can do is take their stories and take their testimonials and take their feedback through the chat, because that's the only interaction we have with them in real time to tell that story. And we have some beautiful stories of people coming back and saying, can I volunteer and work with you? And they even applied for job postings that we put in. And they said, I was
So
supported by
amazing.
Aya Contigo. And then when we piloted it in the US, we did all that user testing, and then we also piloted the chat. We actually were able to support people in restrictive state. They were able to access, and then they came back to us to get support through the accompaniment of taking the pills. And that was just so,
Wow. Yeah.
yeah, it was so validating to know
Yeah.
that it can be applied to this context and they have the same needs. Like when we did the user testing, it's the same needs.
Right.
It's the same
Right.
gaps that we were filling in Venezuela that we can fill here.
I want to encourage folks to ask questions in the Q&A box. And I know that I've got a couple. It looks like, okay, here's some good ones. This person just had 4 good questions at once. So do you want to kind of scan this person's questions and engage with, so essentially it's how did you assemble your team, considering you have this broad international roster of all-stars? Do users enter personal data? And if so, how is it stored?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think
Those are
listing?
very good questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to just start with those?
Yes, good, very good questions. So how do we assemble the team? Right. So basically at the beginning, it was like word of mouth. So Fos Feminista and the local partner platform, they were like, oh, we know this person that was our youth coordinator on the abortion projects and blah, blah, blah. So we're like, great, let's talk to her and see if she can help interview the folks, you know? And then, yeah, so it was at first like word of mouth trust with partners because we knew that they would have access to talent or young people that they know that are activists and passionate in this field. And then that kind of helped with snowball, like they would know different networks to access and different people to contact. And then when we started needing to recruit, we could do it through their networks. And also because the first hires that we brought on were Venezuelan. They had migrated out of Venezuela, but because they were Venezuelan, they had the connection and they had the trust that with the local community. So when we were recruiting in the local community, it was easier to access that talent. And then we don't find things like posting on LinkedIn very helpful. But again, posting on like not on the LinkedIn jobs, but posting on our own profiles where we have certain connections already with value-aligned, mission-aligned folks. And then being on communities like Inroads, which is like an abortion cross regional abortion community. And then the Bloom is another one that's very like social impact minded, where they post job offerings. So that kind of helped. And basically we were also not restrictive in terms of where they're located. So that kind of helped too, because we were remote, we could be very agile. And also we liked to work with people that were young, necessarily not have many working experience skills. So we kind of took chances on that as a way to kind of mentor and bring them onto this journey. So we're very, very fortunate to have our small but mighty team. Personal data. So it is not stored locally on the phone. They do not enter any personal data. So you'll see when you download the app from the US store, we don't ask for any identifying information to use the app. The only time where information might be collected, at least in the Venezuela case, is when we need to refer onwards through the chat. So when they chat with us, we ask them to consent to chatting, and that we won't ask their personal information, but if they offer it, we're gonna have to like tell them that this is how we delete it and blah, blah, blah. Because in Venezuela, they actually are very trusting. They will just pour their whole life story on the chat. And then we're like, oh. And so we've learned to have protocols in place. We already have those protocols in place where we just need to clear the chat history, like after a certain number of after 2 months to make sure, and then we remove all identifying information that even if they voluntarily added from those transcripts, but we can keep at least their threads so we can better understand what they were going through and figure out how to iterate and improve it. And then with the referrals to the local partners on the ground, we need to ask more details because that's part of the security partner protocol of our partners. So our partners get a lot of spam, get a lot of like, robots coming to them, or a lot of fake people coming to get pills because they're going to sell on the black market. So as to honor that, we have a security system in check. And then again, we have to delete all the data. We tell them that we're only sharing it with this partner and blah, blah, blah. So we have like privacy policies and statements already for them to help them. And what we've learned is that we can do all the things for us to protect user data. But ultimately, the issue is that the users have their phone. And ultimately, the case where criminalization usually happens, the most common way it happens is from somebody denouncing them. And then maybe law enforcement coming and taking their phone and forcing them to unlock their phone. So it's about educating the user as to best practice also what to do on their phone. So for example, we tell them if you're going to use the app, set a PIN, and then we have a dummy PIN so that they can log out and it looks like nothing. We also tell them to delete all their WhatsApp messages daily. And we even created a GIF to show them how to do it because it's like complicated. It's not so easy. And so we're trying our best to meet users where they are for their own understanding of data privacy. And fortunately, it's not such a big issue in Venezuela because the government doesn't have time and resources to do this vigilante like checking, but we are very aware that in the US, like anything can happen. So we took more consultations before starting the work in the US to make sure all those things were teed up and ready to go. Yeah, in terms of miscarriage. So yes, I didn't have time to talk about our miscarriage work. That's in the early phases of the human-centered design process. And that came about too, learning from all this stuff that's happening in the US that there's so much overlap. And even as OB/GYNs, we know there's overlap. But I think all the discussions after Roe has fallen has brought up the fact that there's even more overlap. It doesn't matter if it's wanted or unwanted. Like people need abortion care. It's a medical procedure to evacuate the uterus to, save the person's life. So because of that, we want to be able to support because it's the same. We've started the user registers, the same gaps. They're stigmatized, they're alone, they need support. They take the same medications to help with a missed abortion, for example. They need Miffy and Meso or Meso alone. So it's kind of a place where we can like work on so that we can add to supporting more people that might feel like they fall into like the miscarriage or the early pregnancy loss category. And it does, we're trying to see if it does help us in terms of getting more funding, because you're right, like there's not a lot of people that fund abortion work. And so far we do have a grant in Canada that's supporting kind of this work in the miscarriage. So we're going to see how it goes. And the chat, yes. So the chat is our like, our baby with our little, well, not little, but our counseling team. And we need to be very mindful of that team. So when we launched in the US, we didn't make the chat readily available to everybody because we're scared. US is a big, scary place. And like, there's a lot of precautions you need to consider, and we were not ready to just like expose them. So the chat right now only appears on certain user journeys in the app where people face a problem. And then it appears and they can chat because we really didn't want to let people down if they were in a difficult situation and need to chat. And we're also working with partners that have direct connection with marginalized groups or people that are in need. And we are working on making it available for those partners, because we want it to be accessed in a meaningful way by the people who need it. We don't want random people just annoying our team, spamming us, causing trouble. So this is our intention. Our intention in the US is we're not like blitzing. We're not spending like 30,000 of marketing a month to like get people to see and download the app when we can just focus our minimal resources on trying to target those that really need the support at this time.
So, question about like, so the chat is mostly like emotional support, yes? Is that what it ends up being mostly in the States, or?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So because of the research we've done and the pilot we've done with them, we realized that done with partners, is that people also need support with the navigation. It's very,
Mhm.
it's very complex.
Yes.
And so our counselors are trained. Our counselors are trained on how to support people to navigate. So they know how to use I Need an A. They know, our counselors know how to use Abortion Finder, because we're not going to create our own platform to find
Totally.
resources. They know how to access all the practical support resources. We have a specific partner that we can contact if there's a specific issue that needs to be addressed. And so they help people navigate it, because that's kind of, they help people navigate certain areas in Plan C, for example, if they need support on that. They help
Right.
people even fill out telemedicine forms.
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
again, sometimes they're not optimized for mobile, or it's like not in Spanish, and we
Right.
need to help them. So they're trained to be able to support that, and they have supported a few to kind of successfully navigate the like what they need or trying to access at the time. And we also are not afraid to work with feminist networks on the ground
Mhm.
that are doing great work as well. And
Mhm.
so we are having, connections with them as well when needed.
Awesome. I wanted to ask if you could talk a little bit about, you know, the way, like, obviously stigma works differently all over the world. And I think that the United States has like a very specific, like super virulent, very well-funded, very just like surround sound kind of abortion stigma going on between billboards and people screaming outside of clinics, and just the harassment, the cultural noise that someone has to move through while having an abortion. And we think a lot about how self-managed abortion is revolutionary, not only for reasons of access, but because it allows a person to potentially like avoid a lot of that noise. And through the accompaniment model and like a kind of horizontal person to person, like very feminist dynamic, like what you're describing, I feel like there is a potential for empowerment to happen in a way that's like maybe not. I love that you're a doctor, and that you're also like, hey, abortion is over medicalized in the United States. And so I guess I wonder if you could talk a little bit about like the relationship between like stigma and SMA, and how the SMA/accompaniment dynamic can be empowering for folks in different contexts.
Thank you. That's a very good question. Yeah. Okay, so
That's sorry,
relationship.
I'm terrible. It's like such a long, such a long question. I guess just
Stigma, SMA, and
start with,
empowerment.
yeah, and like
Yeah.
stigma, how stigma and um, like how an app like this can help someone
Yes,
potentially
yes,
avoid stigma.
yes. Yes. Well, what was interesting from the user research we worked with like a community health worker that worked with specifically Spanish speakers, and I don't remember which state now, but basically when she showed the app to the Spanish speakers that were attending the clinic, they were just so happy to be able to have information, to feel empowered to even talk to like doctor, because they
Yeah.
don't even feel like they can have conversations with their providers or their caregivers, because they don't have the words to talk to talk about what they need. So in that way, just having that information written in a way that's like already destigmatizing. Like we just say, do you need an abortion? Do you want contraception?
Right.
It's not like, oh, you have an unplanned pregnancy, you need to worry. Like, it's just
Right.
like, you need it? Okay, let's
Yeah.
talk about it. And this is how
Yeah.
you can do it. And it's not scary. It's can be done. It's like, taking Tylenol, or, everybody says misoprostol safer than, or mifepristone safer than Tylenol. So it's like making it just like normal, making it
Right.
look normal. And that in itself already gives a lot of like empowerment to people to be able to be like, yes, I can do this, or I can talk to my doctor about it. Even just the contraception section, they were like, oh, this is how I can ask my doctor. Because a lot of physicians, unfortunately, have their way of doing things or have certain recommendations. And there's unfortunately reproductive coercion that's happening, right?
Yeah.
Because they feel like this is the best choice. Like, Or maybe
Right.
there is a lot of judgment too, like, oh, you already have 4 kids, you definitely need
Right.
like an IUD, so it's making sure that people can say, no, this is what I want because this is what I read and this is what's right for me. So I think it kind of brings it all together. And then having somebody just validate what you're
Right.
going through. So that's what we learned through the chat. It's like this validation. It's just this like
Totally.
sitting there with you and just
Yeah.
being like, I'm there. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter. It just,
Yeah.
it really like takes this big burden off of them and allows them to have that feeling of empowerment and to move forward and to go on. So we definitely see that. And I think being doctors, it helps to kind of say that, this app was led and created by, doctors with the community and with
Right.
women. We're not
Yeah.
saying it's just us,
Mhm.
but it's to add that kind of, I guess, what do you say, credibility?
Yeah.
Because especially in these immigrant or migrant communities, that's still
Sure.
important.
Yeah.
But it's showing that we're not gatekeeping it either.
Totally. It's the best of all the worlds. I think that like what you were just saying about, people's experiences with reproductive healthcare in medical environments, we know that medical racism is so intense in this country. Whether we're talking about like Black maternal mortality or we're talking about language barrier and just culturally incompetent care. I think that we're all really used to thinking about self-managed abortion and something like the accompaniment model as like a last resort. But I'm so interested in the idea that it can be better. You know what I mean? Like, and also just, I don't know, thinking about specifically like undocumented folks and how much like separating abortion from being a place specific, like a thing that you go to a place, if people are like not wanting to leave their state because of ICE checkpoints and shit, like that's a huge barrier to access that like isn't really talked about, as much. I think that like the disenfranchisement, is like vast and it just like needs to be evaluated in each community context in like really specific ways, which is what's so cool about this project, yeah, I had a question about like accessibility and accessibility of language. And I like, and I hope that you know that this is like the opposite of a gotcha question, but I noticed like the gendered language throughout the app. And I wondered if you could talk through your use of the word women. And I feel like I know what you're going to say, but I would love to hear you articulate it.
Yes, on the point of just language in general, I just wanted to point out that the app is also available in English because our user testing showed that even though they might identify as Latinas, they're not comfortable reading in English, in Spanish because of the way they've been schooled.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Again, it's like they were not schooled in their primary language because they didn't have that option, for example. So they're more interested in reading English, but they might speak Spanish. So they might chat with us in Spanish, but read the English. So we've noticed that. And in terms of the gendered language, yes, this is something that when we initially created the content for Aya Contigo, we did consult in Venezuela what it was at that moment appropriate to like generalize and put in there. And they felt like we should just say women and have all the, in Spanish, it's difficult because you have to like adjectives have to be A for feminine or like O for masculine. So it's like very gendered. And we debated this and the majority of the stakeholders and the users were like, we're comfortable with A, this is how we identify. And so that was like 2.5 years ago. And so we're like, okay, we're going to go with this. And then we'll just adapt it as time evolves. And so before launching the US, unfortunately, we were planning to go through this review of the language and the gendered because we know it's a different context in the US, but we unfortunately didn't get to it before we launched. But this is definitely a priority that we want to address. And the nice thing about technology, like adapting the content, is like I could just go on this platform and I could be like, blah, 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 and then it'll be fixed. But we just need to like, gather the resources and hire the right, consultant to work on this reframing of the language in the app. But essentially, it was just taken from what we already learned in Venezuela, and we did it. And then now we're going to adapt it and adjust it as we get more feedback.
Awesome. So I guess I have like maybe one more question, and then I don't know if there's any new ones in the chat. You got a
yes.
oh, there are.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Okay, this is a good
So
question. Okay.
I think that the other Zoom participants can't see the question. So if you want to
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, yes, I should repeat.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, yes. I forgot to mention Danny's original question. The chat in Venezuela is available 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it's same. It's covered for the US, but since it's very hidden and not very many people have access, there's not many people coming on. But we're committed to this 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, even in the US as we expand to more partners. In terms of if there are issues and users need to go to the hospital, is it dangerous because it might become apparent they have taken tablets, right? So it really depends on which route they have taken the tablets. And if so we educate them in the app too, that ideally you would want to take it, like we put the pills either under your tongue hair, it's called sublingual, or you put it in your cheek, between your cheek and your teeth. And then you're supposed to leave it there for like 30 minutes so that the active medication ingredient gets absorbed through the bloodstream directly. And then what happens is there's this white powder residue that stays, and we tell people that they need to like swallow what they can and then like rinse and spit out the rest, because it's just like, not active ingredient that's just holding the pills together. And so if they follow those instructions, then there's no residue, no evidence that you cannot test it in the blood. And I know some right-wing group in the US is trying to figure that out, or I don't even know if they're in like Eastern Europe, or they're trying to figure out if they can detect it in their blood.
They're
I'm just
doing
like,
it in Poland, and
oh my God.
I am hearing that it is, fairly likely that that technology will come here at some point. So I think it's just, and that's like a huge can of worms to get into, but I don't think that we have any reason to think, like, it's complicated because that study that was referenced in the New York Times article about Poland was like written by right-wing, like it was like a fake medical journal essentially.
Yeah, it
But
wasn't credible.
but I do think that that technology exists.
People are working on it. People are putting money towards it, which is sad, but yes, it's happening.
Yeah. Anyway.
Okay, so before that happens, and hopefully it
Yeah.
doesn't get FDA approved, whatever that test is,
Yeah.
there is no way to detect it. If
Right.
the person chooses to use the tablets in the vagina, that's a different story. They have to actually rinse the residue, that white powdery stuff that doesn't get absorbed out, because that's something that people can, if they have to do a vaginal exam with a speculum, for example, like that's what we do if someone comes bleeding, we do a speculum exam to see what's happening. And if they can see the white residue, that can be they can be then implicated as having self-induced kind of the miscarriage. So we do tell them that the issue is, this is something we also want to work on too, is that when people are under duress and they're harassed at the hospital, and like there is a nurse screaming at them saying, you are doing this, you're having an abortion, you forced it. Like at one point, the person's going to break. And this is what happens. It's criminalization. Like it's like we hear this all the time. It's like a nurse outed them, or a doctor outed them, or like somebody at the hospital outed them. So it's really difficult for them to, face that. And hopefully, because it's so safe with MIFI and meso under 12 weeks, and the efficacy is so great, like hopefully this doesn't happen, that like that has to happen very often. But we're hoping to add more information and content and support as to how to support people. And when they do, some of them we had to send to the hospital in Venezuela, for example, and we prepare them. We talk, like our chat team is there with them. They're even chatting with them, like, en route and stuff, just to support them. But so far, knock on wood, we haven't had any issues around that. Advanced gestational age is when it gets a bit trickier, because then, and that's something we're working on too, is trying to provide more support for from an information point of view, but also to our care team, to our chat team, or counselors, to train them more on like advanced gestational age, because it's happening. It's happening. And right now we're able to refer them to our feminist partners, but we just want our team to have more skills to support people, because our feminist partners can only do it in person. So if someone's outside of their jurisdiction, then they can't support them as much. So we're wanting to kind of scale our capacity to kind of support that. And that's just a little bit, it just requires a little bit more extra training, more information support, and also maybe other accompaniers and doulas that are interested in the work can then use the app too, as a resource to support people they're accompanying, because that's kind of, we see that model as a potential, especially in rural settings where people might not have a smartphone. Then they can count on this person to kind of use the app to support the person in their community. Okay, so that's the hospital question. Could it be important for the treating physician to know when each tablet was taken? So if, for example, if someone's has to go to the hospital because they're bleeding, no. Like if I were a doctor and somebody came and said they're miscarrying and they're having an abortion in the emergency room, I asked them when the bleeding started. I don't need to know how it started, because it happens the same way. A natural miscarriage and an abortion invoked by medication looks the same. Like they're cramping, they're bleeding, and then basically what brings them to the hospital is that possibly the products are just stuck in the cervix, and when they're stuck, the uterus can't push it out, so then the blood just comes out and it can't close. Like the uterus needs to close to stop bleeding, but if there's stuff stuck there, that's usually what happens. So then I don't need to know anything else. I just need to know when it started, if they're taking any other medication that can like exacerbate bleeding, like blood thinners. And then you just do the procedure, which is to evacuate the uterus so they stop bleeding.
Right.
Do you have information about the background of individuals in the test group regarding factors like age, financial disability? Was this diversity important for you? How did you ensure that the target audience is diverse? That's a very good question. So when we were doing the user testing in the US, we specifically just focused on Spanish speakers. We did have partners test the app, like partners from organizations like Start Your Abortion and other SRH orgs that would have, I guess, more diversity. But we were very, very focused on making sure we assess the needs of the Spanish-speaking population. And we could only access what we were able to access through partners. So we did have a range of financial situation through that. We didn't have disability represented very well in that, and that's something else that we need to address too in terms of accessibility and disability. That's something we want to consider too as we move forward with developing the app and adapting it to meet the needs of more people. So that's that's something that we recognize as a gap and that we were working on. We're right now working on scaling the app to rural Venezuela, and we already know that they're semi-literate there, and they have more difficulty. So we're already considering the possibility of adding audio content to support alongside the app. So that's just an idea that we have to address like digital literacy, for example. Yeah, and diversity is definitely important, but for now we're trying to make sure we can reach the Latina population. And we want to be able to reach the most marginalized, and that's why we want to do very specific, meaningful partnerships. So partnerships with orgs doing the direct work with migrants and undocumented in Texas or in other states that have large concentrations. I think the largest concentrations are Mexico, Florida, and Arizona. So that's kind of, we're very interested. I mean, New York is very interesting because it's a lot, and maybe this is a use case for people traveling out of state. So I've spoken to a lot of providers, not a lot, but a few providers in New York where they see people traveling outside. And most recently I had the encounter of, meeting somebody who just happened to be in Florida for Disney World and was coming from Latin America, and then found out, and then she flew herself to New York.
Wow.
And then from New York, she would fly back to Florida and then back to Latin America the next day. And I was like,
Wow.
this is where Aya could help.
Yeah.
Like the continuity, of care for this person. So
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing this just thorough, beautiful work with us. It's so exciting to see, like, just to imagine what a digital what digital solutions could be if they were like in the hands of the right people instead of these fucking Machiavellian white dudes from hell. And yeah, I think that it's really exciting to consider. And I'm glad you're on the case. And thank you for talking to us about it.
Thank you, Amelia. You know what's really interesting? I wanted to point this out because one of our partners, they were saying that some of their donors weren't aligned with their new kind of feminist approach to their work around abortion care. And they lost a lot of donors because even though they were okay to support abortion like care, they were not okay with feminist approach. And then it really made people realize that they're interested in abortion from like a population control
Oh my
standpoint.
fucking God.
I know. And then I was just like,
Oh no.
oh no.
Yeah.
It's not even safe to say that people that donate towards abortion,
Right. Oh
you know, is
God.
I know. Anyway, I thought you
They're
would
like, this is a little too empowering for us to support.
I
God,
know, right?
what assholes.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
Terrible. So thank you for all the efforts you do to destigmatize abortion and to rally people and just normalize the conversation and discussions. Like all this storytelling that you provide is just key. That's the key, is for just people to get it out there and to normalize it.
Well, we are so happy to be on the same team as folks like you. Please join us in February for Abortion Academy. It's a related guest to some degree. That will be on February 29th. So I'll be talking to Naomi Brain, who just wrote a book called Abortion Beyond the Law. She's a New York City-based sociologist, and she did fieldwork all over the world looking at self-managed abortion networks in primarily Latin America, Poland, Ireland, and the United States. And it's really amazing. I'm super excited for the conversation, and it's like an excellent phase 2 to this one. So tune in, Genevieve, and the other peeps that are watching. Okay, we're gonna sign off now. Happy holidays, everybody. Take care of yourselves and get some rest. And we love you, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, Genevieve.
Thank you. Bye-bye.